Season 4 episode 2 of Industry is here, and all I can say is wow, what an episode of television that was. I feel I can quite comfortably say that this is probably one of the most underrated shows on TV right now, and this episode proved exactly why. Episode 2 was mainly focused on Sir Henry Muck and his descent into darkness, and we saw the events that led him to the very moment that we saw in the episode 1 finale. Plus, we also saw how he needed to be brought to the brink of death to realize that he actually wanted to live. So with that, let's dive into this week's episode, break down the important details, and I'll share if it's worth a watch. So let's get into it. Here is Industry Season 4 Episode 2 Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. The point of the episode. The entire point of this episode was to basically show Henry as the villain who was self-destructive and not only ruining his own life, but ruining the life of those that care about him in the process as he was about to celebrate his 40th birthday. But what it did by the end of the episode was it had us wanting the best for him after finding out the reason as to why he was acting the way that he was. The clock ticking on the morning of his birthday was something that really stood out to me. This showed how Henry felt as though he was running out of time, and also with it being his father's watch that he was given on his birthday, it leaned into that countdown even more. The countdown for Henry to outlive his father, something that we didn't know at that time. In the opening scene, we saw that Henry lost the election for Wakefield to Jennifer Bevan, the Labour MP, and the lack of purpose that Henry had following that loss was what was brought to the forefront of his mind. This almost tricked us into thinking that that was the reason as to why he was abusing substances and just getting intoxicated whilst losing track of the days, but in reality, it was something different. Yasmin wanted Henry to find purpose again, so she set up a meeting with Whitney so that he could have an opportunity to grow tender with him, but he was turning down the offer. This was something that was frustrating Yasmin because she felt like her relationship was falling apart and there was quite literally nothing that she could do about it. She was on the cusp of leaving Henry, but I suppose what this showed us was the true love that she actually had for him because she was standing by him even in the darkest of moments and when he was treating her terribly. They ultimately erupted in front of one another in a single-take argument scene that was just delivered so perfectly. It captured the sheer heartbreak but the desire that Yasmin had for Henry to return to his usual self and for their relationship to go back to how it was before. During the celebration of his 40th birthday, when he went down to the dining hall after taking even more substances, he saw a hallucination of his father. It was when they went to the pub and he beat up George for speaking bad about Yasmin, where the hallucination said, "Shine your shoes, boy." This not only meant give George a seeing to, but it connected back to the final thing that his father would ever say to him when he was younger. After this was done, the priest spoke to Henry and said, "The first person the coward deserts is himself. Courage ceases to be courage if it wavers. We'd choose to be ruined rather than change. We'd rather die than be present for a single second." In this instance, the priest was almost reflecting on Henry's father, but as well, with it cutting to Henry going to his car, switching on the engine and closing the garage door, it was also talking about him giving up on himself. It was during this scene where we saw Henry's father speaking with his son on the morning of his 40th birthday, and he took himself outside. As Henry watched on from the window of his house, his father ended things for himself. This was why Henry was so broken in the build-up to his 40th birthday. He didn't know how to handle the idea of outliving his father, hence why he was planning on ending things too. It was only through being on the cusp of death and hearing Yasmin's voice within his mind which brought him back to life. Then, once he returned back to his house, he embraced her, they were intimate on the car, and from there he returned to who he used to be. He was now going to accept the position that Whitney offered him at Tender and was going to get his life back on track, even telling Yasmin that he thought that they should have a child together. This episode was just beautifully constructed, where we got a deeper look inside the mind of Henry Muck and all of the troubles that were plaguing him. I feel like it was also a deeper look at the fact that sometimes men don't speak their minds or they can feel like they're less of a man for doing so, and that's why he turned to other ways of dealing with it, especially seeing as though that's what his uncle was telling him to do. It showed that he never properly had the support system in place to move on from his father's death. So with this episode quite literally being a countdown to his 40th birthday, the time where his father decided to end things, it was a really haunting, bleak episode that was strangely beautiful to watch unfold. My review of the episode. This could genuinely be the best episode in the entire series. From start to finish, I was hooked and I didn't want it to end. I loved how the entire opening part of the episode led us to the point where episode 1 finished, where Henry was playing on the harpsichord. Seeing his intoxicated mind and how his reality was just morphing around him, where moments were just passing him by, such as even getting dressed, it had this sense of immersion to it where I was utterly impressed with the transitions. A scene that I think has to be spoken about on its own is the one where Yasmin and Henry were having their argument inside of the bedroom. The decision to have this as a single take shot allowed it to feel like a real free-flowing argument where the tension was just rising and rising until it all boiled over. As much as they were angry at each other, you could tell that this was all coming from a place of care on Yasmin's side and that she'd just reached the end of her tether with it. She loved him, she didn't want to leave him, but she knew that she'd have to if he wasn't going to change. The emotions that were present in the room reminded me of something from The Bear. It was just so intense, and like I said, the single take shot just allowed there to be a natural flow to it, which made it feel even more real. The way the camera moved as well, with the fast whipping movements between speakers in the conversation, was something that also added to that feeling of like we were actually there, like a fly on the wall. Kit Harrington showed why he's pure mustard in this episode. The conviction that I had when watching this character was just incredible. For the longest part of the episode, I was sitting there wondering if he was acting like this because he felt like he just didn't have a purpose, but when later on, understanding that it was because he literally watched his father end things for himself when he was younger on his 40th birthday, it almost justified why Henry was spiraling so much. I also thought it was pretty powerful watching Henry basically needing to get to the point of death to realize that he actually wanted to live. Did he feel guilty at the fact that he was going to outlive his father and become his senior? Maybe. The man that had always been older than him in his mind was now younger than he was. It's a difficult thing to get your head around. Something else that I want to praise is the fact that even though the story was predominantly focused on Henry and his descent into pure darkness, it didn't grind the overall story to a halt in place of this character-driven episode. We still got Whitney involved in this one with the proposition that he put forward to Henry. We still got the Labour MP and her presence, showing how she's going to be a force when it comes to tender. And we also got Harper and her burning desire to be successful no matter what the cost. The final thing that I want to praise in this episode is the music selection that they had underneath the scenes. The song choices just worked perfectly. From the opening scene and even the ending scene, it really matched the tone, mood and setting and the overall vibe that the show has. This show feels like it has traces of Succession within it with the way that it's shot, the way that the conversations are often structured, with the pace, rhythm and intensity that they have. And it's just as fun to watch as it too, because, like Succession, there's so much at stake. As nice as this character-driven episode was, I am looking forward to getting back to the main story next week, so bring on episode 3. So, there you have it, Industry Season 4 Episode 2, Ending Explained. If you want to see every episode of Industry Season 4 being broken down, then check the playlist below, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future videos. What did you think of this episode? Share your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video, and I'll see you in the next one.